We are back live again. Multiverse Comics presents. This is your host, Mick Williams, here again to talk to you about multiple things and all things comics and the industry and the world and basically whatever just kind of pops into my head or things I think you guys might want to talk about or hear about today. So I had some ideas for this evening's topics that I don't think a lot of people talk about, and it was kind of inspired by a customer that was in on Monday and returned on Tuesday. So basically, when you're running a comic book store, to me, I think that to run a successful business isn't just about being profitable. And I would argue in this case that the business is, even if it isn't making you rich by any means or even pulling a profit the first few years, as long as that business is doing the goals that it is set out to do, which is, in my opinion, at least for a comic book store, someplace that everyone enjoys going. I know in my eye of what I wanted out of a comic book store was modeled after my favorite store that no longer exists. Now, if you're my wife listening right now, you know the story that's coming up and you've heard it a million times. And if you are a man by the name of Tom Green, who owned Universal Superheroes, you know exactly what I'm going to be talking about. So here's the backstory. Back in about 2001, I was in college, and the town that I was going to college in was just had a comic book store, had just closed the summer before, and there was a new one opening. It ended up being called the Universal Superheroes, ran by a guy named Tom Green. Super cool guy. Tattoo artist as well. Best tracer I know. I can hear him cringe every time I say that. But Tom is very good at what he does at all things, whether it's comics, tattoos, piercings, or whatever he's doing. He is an expert and master in his fields. I owe a lot to Tom, as most of my industry knowledge prior to opening the store, I learned from Tom. I spent hundreds of hours in that store when it was open, as both a patron and an employee. So I got to see firsthand how to do diamond ordering and all that fun stuff. And this is actually when Central was still a distributor as well. They had gone out during the time frame to which I was over there. Marvel, doing the bankruptcy thing and all that fun stuff that they used to do all the time. But Tom had a very simple philosophy when it came to running his store. Make it a place that people want to come and hang out. Be the best comic shop that you could be. It wasn't always about making money, although that's nice. Let you eat and do all that fun stuff and have inventory and, live, which is also important. But, when it comes to things that a lot of places don't do, it's the little things that make everyone happy. And sometimes you're lucky and you're the only comic book store in a town or for miles. So anybody who's interested in comics generally comes to you, and that helps your business. Some of us are in an area to where it could be considered slightly oversaturated. But luckily in some areas, we're diverse enough that everybody offers something a little different. So your clientele has no problem shopping at multiple stores for different things that they're looking for. So, different expertises for different collectors and that sort of thing, whether it's you focus more on gaming or new issues, back issues, hard to find stuff. A couple different options as far as comic shops are concerned. Whether you buy collections from people to resell or whether you just sell new stuff or toys, like I said, gaming stuff, used books, whatever. The nerd community has a lot of room for everybody. And especially when those businesses want to work together to help make everybody successful, which is where your expertise come in. But Tom got lucky and didn't have any competition of any kind in his town. However, the big downfall for him on his deal was that it is a college town. Kids go home in the summer, and most of his business was college students. So you would be, while school was in, it was the feast and famine during the downtimes. Christmas vacation, summertime. Unfortunately, sometimes those periods to which you need extra money in order to make your normal life work. And a lot of comic guys do have second jobs or other sources of income, whether it be conventions, second jobs. Tom was a tattoo artist. He was very good at it. So he continued to do that. And that's something that he could do, when he wanted to, really, and didn't have to worry about, making sure that the store was always taken care of. But he also had, business and enough to be able to bring in an employee and all that fun stuff. Plus, we're talking almost 20 years ago in comics at this point, which blows my mind that was 20 years ago. But, things in the comic world were a little different back then. But I digress. So, what is it that everybody wants to see in a comic book store? Why? And what is different between what you as the customer come to expect from a store versus how we, the owners of said store, view how it should run and what things, to carry and what services to offer and all that. It is my humble opinion that if you are running a comic book store, that you need to make sure you know your stuff. And if you don't know the answer to a question, have a resource or another expert of some kind on hand to answer said question, especially if it is something to do with a product that you are carrying in your store. Now, in my store, I do not carry certain gaming stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, Magic singles. I do Magic packs, and we have a Magic crowd, and we cover that stuff for everybody, but we don't do individual single cards. Also, we do a lot of D&D and that sort of thing. We don't do a lot of board games. We are getting into some of that, and miniatures and that sort of thing, and different kind of paints and stuff as we're branching out in the new location and settling in. But if somebody came in and asked me a question about, hey, where do I get these Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Or where do I get these Pokemon cards? I've worked with enough of the other businesses around in order to be able to say, hey, go to one of these other guys that are technically a competitor of sorts for some markets, but they're the experts around and they'll take care of you. Because again, in my eye, if everybody works together, everybody wins. This is how we sustain the nerd world. Because let's face it, there's just not that large of a percentage of people who are into the comics and the gaming and all that stuff that there used to be. And those markets, especially in towns where they're split up between multiple stores, are much harder to accommodate. What I would suggest, if you have an idea and you wanted to open a store, what would I tell somebody that asks, hey, should I open a store? I'm going to say it depends on why you want to open the store. If you're looking to make money, don't bother. You can ask about any vendor at a comic book convention. Just about any shop owner will tell you, you don't open a comic book store to make money. There are a few who think that you do. And I would say that over the years they found out that that is not necessarily the case. But when I say make money, I don't mean that your business isn't sustainable and you can't live off of it. What I'm saying is you're not going to get rich. Comic books some of them are valuable, and I say quite valuable, but if you sit down and look at a price guide or you look at the sales on books, there are a handful of books that you would ever be able to locate that will allow you to retire off of like it's a lottery winning. And I say a handful because that's all there is. Yes, there are some expensive books, and your term of expensive may be relative based on your current economic status. But you will not be driving around a Ferrari, most likely, if you are a comic book salesman for a comic book store. So why do it? Why run this business? What's the point? If you're not going to make the money, right? Like I do it because I love it. And I think a lot of people do it because they love it. Not just because they saw some movies once and thought it was something neat. Or, I had the option of opening this business versus this business, and I went with this one because I thought I'd make more money out of this one. Because then you run into other problems that will hurt the business, and I think hurt the industry, especially if somebody new is getting into it. You have to know your product, right? So that's like your number one thing, especially if you're a salesman of any kind. You got to know your product inside and out. Comic books are a hard product to know. And I'm not saying about new issues and that sort of thing, but if you're going to carry any sort of back issues or you're going to talk somebody into getting something, you have to know what's going on in those books. You have to take your time, you have to read them, you have to understand them, you have to love them. That is my whole philosophy on the whole store. Every Wednesday, when comics would come in, other than checking the books in and putting everything in people's pull box like we all do that own a business on Wednesdays, The first thing that once that was completed that Tom would do was grab a stack of books, sit down and read them. He enjoyed the books. He also read the ones he didn't like. Why would you waste your time reading a book that you don't like? So you know what's in it. And that's the trick. If you know what's in the book, when somebody comes in and they say, hey, I need that Spider-Man issue. If I've sat down and read my books this week, I know what happens in that Spider-Man issue. And I'm going to say something along the lines of, you know what? This is a great issue. You're going to love it. By the way, this issue also ties in to this other book that came out this week. Or there was a reference to a book from last week. Or there's a book coming out next week that picks up the rest of this story so you don't miss out on it. We comic book guys are generally impulse buyers. And I say this because I know my buying habits, and that's generally how it happens. I go in, I see something cool, I see a cool cover, I see a tie-in to something I didn't know was there. There's a character I haven't seen in years. Something, impulse. Ooh, I gotta have that one too. That's generally how this works. So, if you don't know your stuff, you're going to have a harder time making sales. Also, if you don't know your stuff, you may be pricing yourself out of business. You may be running into a scenario to which you think that a book is worth some money, to which it isn't. Or you're selling a book for next to nothing that could pay your rent for the next month. Comic book industry is very volatile when it comes to these keys and trends, and so it's not always the number one that's worth the money. See, that's what the individual, or I'm going to call the layman of the comic book world, thinks, is that their books are all worth $1 million. Anything that says number one, it's a valuable book, must be something good, right? Because it's the first one. Not exactly the case. As we saw this as trend, especially in the 90s with all the boom books, the, Dark Horse and the companies that no longer exist like Malibu and all that fun stuff, the rise of Image and the overprints and the chrome covers and the just bulk gluttony of the comic book world before the bubble pop and the empire fell. So maybe you're a dealer that doesn't know any of this. You pay too much for those books that come in the door. Or you rip somebody off and pay them too little, and they find out about it later. Then you're going to get a bad name. Now, any dealer will tell you that when somebody brings you a stack of books that they want you to purchase, it is the responsibility of the person bringing them in to understand what they have, what they want for them, because they're going to ask. That's the first question out of my mouth every time. What do you want for these books? Depending on the responses and how they want to go about it is depending on how the deal is done. I don't like making offers up front on your books that you have an idea of what you want out of them. Sometimes we're very close. Sometimes we're very far away. Sometimes you think I'm crazy. Sometimes I think you're crazy. That's just the way it works. It's the comic book world. You found a stack of stuff in Grandpa's attic. You think it's worth $500 because you've got 400 issues, but they're all water stained. Covers are detached. They're all from the 90s. Or you might hit some gems and have some rough Silver Age. Or maybe you have some near perfect gem mints from the Golden Age. The job of the comic book store is to pay the bills and make some money and make sure that they've got stock, right? That's the primary goal of any business. But the experience that you have at that store determines whether or not your business is going to be successful, at least in my opinion, and whether or not you will have repeat customers and people will come to your business and enjoy coming to your business. I don't expect to please everyone. There are going to be people that are happy. There are going to be people that are unhappy. That comes with the territory. However, we had a customer come in on Monday. This is his first time in. Super nice guy. Looked around the store, asked about some issues, asked about some grading, looked for several copies of things that he didn't have. We were able to locate some of. I had some in the back stock, some I don't have, some I can't get, just because there are some older issues. But we found him some stuff. He leaves the store. Seems to be a happy guy. Said he'd most likely be back in a week or so to take a look at some more issues. Sent me a message later about a couple books that he was looking for to see if I had them. I said, yeah, I got a couple of them. Not the whole run, but a few. And actually, I think he messaged me during the last time I was recording a podcast. So then I get a notification that he wrote a review on the store. And I went, oh, okay. So I pulled it up. It says something along the lines of, nice store, knowledgeable staff, had what I needed, nice place. But then it goes on to mention something that I really appreciated. Have read the reviews that are negative to this location, and I find them to be garbage or BS or whatever he said. Either they were untrue or the problems have been resolved or taken care of or whatever. And I'm going to tell you, that review meant a lot to me. I've gotten reviews from all kinds. I've gotten reviews from people I know, people I don't know. I've had quite a few. The vast majority of the reviews that we get are good views. Again, you can't please all the people all the time. I understand that. That's going to happen. There's an occasion or two where somebody's upset or there's a misunderstanding and something doesn't go right and they write a bad review or whatever. Sometimes there are people that are just not nice. They want something, they want it for a certain price. That's not something that you can do. They get mad, they write a bad review or whatever. The ones that bother me are the ones that, I don't think they bother me. The ones that I think that are irritating are the ones that I know aren't accurate. Somebody comes in, they write a review that is completely false because it has happened in the past. And they think they're smart. The individuals that are in the store at the time see the review, get angry, want to, pop off about it or whatever. But anybody that comes into the store can tell which reviews are accurate and which reviews aren't. And this guy got it. He said, I had no contact with this guy prior to his walking in the store. He shops at a few stores that I deal with on a regular basis. Nice places. The owners are cool. But this guy got it. And the fact that a complete stranger comes in and can tell after, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes of a conversation that this location, this shop that I've put a lot into, time, effort, finances, he understands that I do what I do because I love it. Because he enjoyed it. So that review really meant a lot to me. Because look, I've been to conventions where there are guys behind the counters that don't care about the books. They want to get the money, they want to get the hell out of there, and that's just the end of it. You got something to sell to them, they're going to lowball you real hard, practically insult you, think that they're the end-all, be-all experts to everything that there is to do in comics, and you should pay them extra just because you got a chance to talk to them. And then there are the guys that generally want your business. If something's out of your price range and you're interested in it, do not be afraid to ask someone, hey, I see you've got it marked at whatever. Is there any way we can work a deal? Or if you think something's a little overpriced, feel free to ask. What's the worst they're going to do? Tell you no? But most of the comic stores and most of the vendors at cons, they'll deal with you. I know this because I deal with a lot of them. And it's not because I'm a dealer, because most of the time I go to a convention, I don't go as a dealer. I go with somebody who's there looking to buy and sell and see what I can do and find good deals for either my collection or for the store. And there are several people that you get to know at these conventions, and you make relationships, and they know you're a vendor, and so sometimes you get special deals and whatnot. But don't be afraid to ask, especially going into a comic book store. Most of the locations that you go to shop, none of the prices are set in stone. Again, most. I'm not going to tell you all. There are a few places that will not budge on anything, which is fine. That's the way they want to make their sales. That's the way they can make their sales. It's perfectly okay. But you may find that there are locations that are going to be they don't want your business more than others. Let me put it that way. But also, you have to understand that depending on what they have in it or what they need out of it, may not be a dealable price for you either. So don't be afraid, but also don't get angry if it doesn't work out for you. Just my opinion. But anybody who wants to leave a review for my store, you go right ahead. Good or bad, we will proudly display those views. We will never make it so you can't leave a review. We will never alter, falsify, or do anything else to lead you to believe that we are something that we are not. Comics, the world of comic books, mean a lot to me. For a lot of various reasons. And they do to a lot of people for a lot of various reasons, not just because, the stories are good, or you had them when you were a kid, or, maybe a grandparent or parent, or someone that's no longer with you used to get them and read them to you, or read them with you, or a buddy, left you some books or something like that. A lot of reasons for a lot of people to love comics. And there's no wrong reason to love your comics. But when you go into a store, there are things that you should expect, in my opinion, for a store to be able to do. Number one, they need to know what they are talking about. They need to know what they are doing. If they don't know the product to which you are asking about, I would question it. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to know everything about every issue. But if you walk into a comic book store and they can't tell you what Crisis on Infinite Earths happens to be, they can't tell you, what the significance of a Hulk 181 would be, or an X-Men 101, or an Amazing Fantasy 15. I'd question the store. I'd question the owner. I'd question the employee. I'd question it all. But, again, this is all my opinion. You are entitled to your own. Feel free to express that. Send me an email, mick@multiversecomics.biz. Check out our Facebook at facebook.com/MVScomics, I believe. Multiverse Comics LLC on there, Parkersburg, West Virginia is the location. We'd love to hear from you on anything that you have to say about any comic, game, or related conversations. Especially if it's anything that we've talked about, and I say we as in I'm talking and you're listening, talk about here on the podcast. I'd love to hear from people. Also, if you'd like to set up and have a conversation with me about something, let me know. We'll set up a date and time, and we'll get you on here and let you be heard. Love to do it. Be a lot of fun. So, I think that's really all I had to say for this evening. I hope you enjoyed listening and learned a thing or two about how we run our store. If it helps anybody out, great. If you're looking for a store, let us know. We don't turn anybody away because every comic book nerd needs a place to go. My philosophy is that our store ends up being what I call the Cheers of the nerd world. We have our regulars that when you come in that door, you can expect to see just about the same crowd all the time. On certain days, there are certain days when certain crowds show up more so than others, like Tuesday night Super Smash was last night. We had a great crowd for it, led by Mark Johnson, and we get quite competitive It's a lot of fun. They are good. If you come to play Smash, expect to be on top of your game, or you will lose. These guys are good. But they have a great time. And they're really good teachers if you're wanting to learn, especially to get into the pro world. These guys do a lot of big tournaments. They go all over for this. Some of the best players in Ohio and West Virginia do play at this store. They are ranked, and like I said, they are very good. But they are all very nice people and want you to come play and want you to come learn. Just like any other game that goes on at Multiverse, we want you there to check it out, to enjoy yourself. Bring a friend. Have some fun. Hopefully, our location ends up meaning as much to you as it does to me. And like I said, if you have questions, comments, please let us know. And I will quit chewing your ear for this evening. And we will see you for the next issue on the issues for Multiverse Comics. We'll bag and board this one as well. Have a good night.